Thanks to all of you for joining. I'm just absolutely amazed here. I'm going to get out of the lights a little bit. Absolutely amazed at the progress of Canvas. I first encountered Canvas at CanvasCon in 2012. Became users at Hult of Canvas, and there were probably about 300 attendees at that point in the US. To see almost 1,000 here is absolutely incredible. My apologies, I've been flying around a bunch and have a cold, so apologies to torture you this late in the afternoon with a nasally voice. But I hope I'll be able to share something interesting and exciting about our journey at Hult International Business School, what we've been able to do, and frankly, where we're trying to go in the future with the hope of finding partnerships and others who want to go on that journey with us. Looks like there are some who have a theme on what Nano-Courses are, what blendeds are. This is great. I probably ought to do a little bit about what those mean for us, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what these are. And then I'll get into talking a little bit about Hult. Why did we do these? How did we go about it? What are some of our lessons along the way? And certainly, what are some of the open questions and challenges for us on our journey at this point in time? Let me find myself clicker here. So, Hult is a global business school. We started from the R30 Little School of Management about a dozen years ago, 25 students at that point in time. We've now grown to 5,000 students around the world and 5,000 executive education folks. We are focused only on business, so business school only. That's a little bit unusual in today's higher ed world. And all of the work we've done so far has been in person. So all of our students are in classrooms somewhere around the world at this point in time. I'll show you in a second our campuses, which actually are part of the reason why I had to go down a blended path in the very recent past. But we're a school that's come about quickly. We're ranked in the FT 100 at this point in time. And we're very focused on thinking about what a business school of today and the business school of the future wants to look like. Very focused on saying, how do we provide a global perspective in today's world? Very focused on saying, how do we provide a sense of self and leadership? What are the soft skills that our learners need? And finally, across the last year or so, we've gone down a journey of saying, how do we provide the right future mindset? We're living at a point in time where, in the fourth industrial revolution, everybody's talking about the skills that are needed for the future. We certainly believe that there are a new set of skills that our business school graduates, that our executives need. How do we think about helping them build that right future mindset is a big theme for us. And we get the pleasure of doing this around the world. We have campuses, and probably very hard to read any of this from the back, but we have campuses all the way from San Francisco over through Shanghai, London, Dubai, Boston, sometime in New York City. We've had a campus in Sao Paulo, Brazil at a point in time as well, because we're true believers in experiential education and saying, if you want to learn about business and doing business in a particular part of the world, well, you ought to go do it in person there. You ought to go experience it. And so for this kind of an institution, which is this global and now at 5,000 degree students around the world, one of our key themes as we entered the situation of, look, we're trying to teach the right set of skills for the future. And look, I won't belabor this. You've probably heard about it today. You've heard about it a lot, I'm sure. The skills for the future in this fourth industrial revolution. I'll just put up the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum and some words from him up there. But look, this is all educators today, technologists today, are wrestling with the question of, how do we provide the right skills for the future? Whether it is themes that come about because of new technologies, so whether it's artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, gene editing, energy of the future, cybersecurity, all of these topics create a need for very new and different kinds of skills, both technical skills, as well as business skills, new kinds of business skills, as well as new softer skills, problem solving, collaboration, communication, teamwork need to happen in very different ways in our times. And so with these very global sets of campuses that we had to ask the question of, how do we provide new experiences that can be right at the frontier, helping our students learn about robotics or AI or self-driving cars, while providing the same kind of in-person experience we like to do in our campuses. And so the answer for us eventually came around to blended learning. Like I said, we have been a school that's been very focused on the in-person experience. We adopted Canvas 6 years ago to try and improve the experience in the classroom, but we'd never gone down the path in any serious way on blended. But when we came into these terrains, and I'll show you some of the pilots we ran, but we started with self-driving cars, autonomous vehicles, because we were getting a lot of our employers asking for our students to have a sense for where the technologies of tomorrow are going. We've defined our mission to be one of relevance at Hult. How do we become the most relevant business school in the world? And relevance for us was all about how do the employers that our students want to join after their programs, how do those employers get the best possible, the best trained graduates that they could have? And as we started to hear requests for things like self-driving cars or machine learning, really from the perspective, given that we're a business school, of what's the so what? What is the implication of these technologies for a whole host of organizations out there? Whether it is Continental, which is in the automotive business, whether it is Uber, whether it is a smaller startup, what are the implications of these various technologies from a business perspective for all of these organizations? And how do we train up our students to really be able to wrestle with those issues? And so it ended up being a great opportunity for us to say, look, we certainly don't have a lot of faculty who can teach these terrains. This is new, it's at the frontier. We don't have textbooks on these topics. We're going to have to be right at the frontier of the content. We also realized, given how quickly moving these terrains are, we wanted to have an approach, a posture of curation first, rather than we're going to invent it here, we're going to get locked into our point of view, which is often what we end up with courses. And so we wanted to avoid the not invented here syndrome. We wanted to go after serious curation and say, how do we keep these courses at the very frontier of where these fields are? That's what relevance is going to be all about. And we realized with our 5 global campuses, there was no way we were going to have enough faculty, enough of the right expert faculty to be at those campuses at all points in time. We were also looking at doing this as very short courses. So Nano for us means a 1-credit course. This is a little bit of an American notion. We are an American business school. We're both an American and a UK school. But we wanted to get away from the notion of all classes are a given length. The standard theme that is true for many of our higher education institutions, you end up with fixed length courses. That's the way semesters lay out. We said, no, we're actually going to go for about 1/3 of that content, because we think that gave us really interesting freedom in terms of saying we can introduce these new topics in very quick ways. We can explore the business implications of them, but we don't have to force ourselves to cover entire semesters when we're quite not ready for it. So that's our notion of Nano, small, right? And the ability to bring many of those so that our students can say, look, I want to learn a little bit about self-driving cars, I want to learn a little bit about machine learning, I want to learn a little bit about robotics, and think about how to combine these together in interesting business models. So unlike Chris, our previous speaker, who was talking about drones and sort of getting deep into drone technology, we're not about getting deep into drone technology and how do you build and the like. We're far more about how do you think about the so what, the business implications. And this is where it was really helpful to be able to say, let's provide tasters across a number of topics and really push the business skills for our students. So Nano-Courses, we decided we had to blend for the variety of reasons that you see here. And we also realized we're going to have a pretty different in kind student experience. So let me put that up for you. Historically, you have cohorts of 60 to 75 in a classroom. They're from 40, 50 countries of the world. They're used to coming to a classroom a couple times a week across a number of months. Pretty traditional. They were used to the Canvas experience, to go on and find their content, to potentially have some discussions with each other, but not a version where they were used to mostly doing activity via the platform. And so we did Nano, but then we also had to ask ourselves the question of what's the right blend? What's the blend of asynchronous and synchronous? What's the blend of self-pacing, where we're going to provide them some really interesting curated content? And I'll share some of that in a moment in terms of how we thought about that curation. But we also wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a set of students who were clicking through content, watching a set of videos, and then at the end of it getting some kind of a certificate. We wanted them to really engage. We needed them to really engage, to collaborate with their peers, to come up with new ideas, to have debates. And so we asked ourselves the question of what are the formats we can use for blending, right? And we tried a number of them. We made some choices to think about what were the in-person blends we could do. How could we think of blends that were virtual? We use Zoom as a technology. I'll share the various technologies we use in a moment. But we looked at various different formats where we said, how could we get the maximum flexibility possible? How could we make sure that our maximum number of our students from anywhere in the world, and we do have some challenges when you think of time zones from Shanghai to San Francisco, potentially on the same course. How do you solve that problem? We want to make sure everybody could get access. And one of the new themes we introduced as a result was to think about learning engineers. And I suspect that's, so let me just get a quick show of hands for how many of you do you, in your institutions, or if you're a vendor, have you worked with learning engineers? Show of hands. Okay, so a few. I think there's a whole theme that's evolving from instructional design over to learning engineering. I think that's a fabulously interesting place to go. And I'd love to certainly talk to folks that are going down that path, because we introduced the notion of learning engineering about a year ago to say, how do we really instrument the student journey? How do we make sure we're worrying about the student journey in all of the right ways to make sure we have maximal impact? Because we are coming from a world where it was our faculty member that was worrying about what that journey was, and we think we have to worry about it even further as we go down these blended courses. So learning engineers were a critical part of the story. And of course, providing deep faculty support for our content experts as we brought them onto a far more virtual form of doing things, new formats, both in terms of length of course, in terms of the kinds of materials. There were some significant change management issues. Happy to address any of those if folks like, but I imagine all of you have taken on change management issues as you've rolled out programs. This wasn't very different. It was taking on multiple issues at the same time, which is probably a little more challenging, but not particularly different in kind. Here were the set of courses, topics that we went after. So we decided to pilot 9 of these. These were very much driven by what we were hearing from our corporate partners, what we see from the likes of a World Economic Forum in terms of the technologies that are being perceived to be critical today. So whether it's blockchain or autonomous vehicles, robotics, IoT, Internet of Things, energy of the future, so on and so forth. And as you look at that list, it certainly will drive home the fact that a business school is not going to be deep in most of these areas. We've certainly had to adapt and get deeper, find ourselves faculty that have some of these areas of expertise, but we've done it at the level of saying, how do we find a couple of central faculty as opposed to putting faculty on each of our campuses in these areas? And frankly, that's what's allowed us to do it, because it would have been prohibitive if we tried to do 9 times 5 in terms of hiring our faculty. And the formats we explored were looking at self-paced, so going completely asynchronous and saying, let's just provide curated content to our students and our learners. It's engaging. Let's give them exercises, quizzes, and the like, see where they end up. More like a MOOC format, if you would. We tried versions, and I've taught a couple of these. IoT and machine learning are areas that I spend time in. So I've taught a couple of them. Let's go in person, closer to traditional formats. And then the dominant format that we eventually evolved towards was saying, how do we use synchronous video conferencing as a tool for real interactivity, right? And so we've tried a variety of these. Let me show you some of the outcomes that we got from them. We, like many others, use student evaluations, student feedback, focus groups as a way of thinking about how our courses have gone. And we went on a year-long journey to try a range of formats, to try a range of topics, from a 3-day intensive on the far left-hand side to 2-week versions on the right-hand side. And we put together what we feel now, having tried it with about 500 students, and this year, starting last month in September, we're now rolling to about 2,500 students across our various campuses. We found a couple different formats that work really well for us, where I think the themes are, how do you make sure it's intense enough to keep students engaged? Because when they're self-paced, the cost of going in and out of a course, the cost of re-engaging with the course, the mental cost of that is high. And so if you can give them bursts of intense experiences, you have a much better shot at keeping them engaged and not spending a lot of time trying to bring them back process-wise into the course. And we've tried a whole host of sizes, everything from small 15-person courses to 50-person courses to sort of open-ended asynchronous. Our optimal format at this point in time, after all of this experimentation, is saying let's do about 50 students or so at a time, and we can run many simultaneous sections very quickly, where we're able to have 70% of our content happen in a self-paced or semi-regulated pace, with a couple of interactions, 3 interactions across 2 weeks that are 90 minutes each, to help our students really interact with each other, to interact with the faculty, to have a chance to present projects. So, range of formats that we've tried, that one's become optimal for us. Let me share with you, given that this is a Canvas conference, I suspect there's folks with real interest in what are the sets of technologies that are driving this. Certainly we have Canvas at the core as our LMS, and again, all of our students have access for all of their other courses, so it was pretty easy to go down that path. But a couple of technologies that we had to bring in that were critical for us. One is these 3 sessions that we do in a 2-week period that are live interactive, where we use Zoom. Just get a show of hands, how many of you use Zoom in some way, shape, or form? Okay, so maybe 20, 30% of the room, so lots of folks well aware of it. And the theme that really worked for us here was, how do we push for the right kinds of behaviors from our students? So from the first session onwards, we said, your video cameras are always on. We had rules about how their chat sessions would get managed, what was allowed, what was not allowed by way of chat. So setting in place some of the right ground rules was really critical to getting those interactive sessions moving in the right way. And we had lots of trepidation. We had my campus in Dubai talked about how the government there will occasionally decide that telecoms are a regulated entity and your service might go down. How do you think about backup? Certainly we've had some of that issue in Shanghai as well. VPNs are not permitted, etc. So we had to work through a lot of that. We had to have lots of backup plans in place for it. But maybe it's Murphy's Law. When you have the backup plans in place, the technology worked beautifully for us. And we really had students saying they really felt like they were able to build very strong connections with each other, even though they were all virtual. We used for interactive video, where again, we did something that's now becoming relatively commonplace. We said, let's create 6 to 8 minute videos, no longer than that, from our core faculty. Let's curate some other videos. As we did those videos, we introduced a significant number of interactive elements. So things like quizzes that got dropped into the middle of a video, things like social feeds where students were able to comment As a video was playing, a professor could also introduce specific moments where they were expected to comment in some way, shape, or form. We were able to actually keep track of numbers of questions they were getting right or not. So a whole range of themes where we wanted to get away from the typical behavior that we've heard many other institutions talk about, where as students play video, it sort of just goes on play. It's on autoplay, and it's not clear exactly what they absorb. And we wanted to make sure we were able to tell exactly where they were, how much engagement we were getting, and to be able to provide back to the professor a sense of where were their topics that needed more exposition in the live sessions. And so our tool, again, this is an area where we're looking for partners and collaborators. We've used Feedback Fruits as our tool for this one, but we think there's a lot of progress that needs to happen in terms of making it really easy to get data feedback from our technology platforms. We use a lot of co-creation tools, things like Mentimeter, polling technology, things like Padlet, where we were able to say to our students, groups of 5, they were creating new business models in the particular domain that they were studying. And they used Padlet as a means of being able to create storyboards. So for any of you that have experienced live poster boarding sessions where groups of students sort of put up a poster and say, here's the cool thing that we've done. Well, we were able to do that virtually. And in fact, we got to the point where our students were saying, we can do sets of things virtually here that we couldn't do in a classroom because of how you can manipulate some of these digital objects. So that was some really interesting learning and success for us, where we found ourselves saying, look, there's co-creation tools that we just started to experiment with, and we thought they'd be interesting optional themes, but they've become very core to the experience for us very quickly. And we try very hard, and you can see from the complicated arrows I have on the slide, some of them provide data back and forth from Canvas. Some of them will take data from Canvas but not provide any back in. And we're going to have to sort through many of these themes for it to be a truly seamless experience. But we're starting to find tools that are allowing this blended experience, this nano-blended experience, to work in a way that at least our student evaluations are saying are happening at the same level as our in-person classrooms, which is a level of teaching we've always been very proud of. Let me close with a couple of themes here and then turn to questions and collaborations. I call the whole theme that we've built here the nudge LMS. I suspect most of you are familiar with the word nudge, behavioral economics, and themes of saying, how do you guide users into certain kinds of behaviors, certain kinds of decisions? Whether it is the decoy price on the right-hand side, where you say, if you had a couple bottles of wine, one looks expensive. The moment you add a third, the middle doesn't look so expensive. It's just a decoy. Guess what? We had to do a little bit of that with some of our student readings. We've hit the point where students aren't particularly fond of reading, certainly not as fond of reading as some of our faculty think they should be. So you end up with long lists that never actually get read. We found some clever ways to say, how do we get some decoys going so students will read what you need them to read? Think about an effect, sort of the visual design effect on the left-hand side. How do you actually use visual design within the Canvas platform? And we sort of came up with look and feel templates for our courses, where we wanted to make sure students were guided into the right platforms of usage. Social proof is another mechanism. There's a whole range of themes that behavioral economics has figured out. And we've just gone in and said, let's figure out how to do this within the LMS. And I'd love it if our friends at Canvas would sort of make some of these core features within the system. We'd certainly love that help from the technologists here. And so, I'll skip through this one. We built a whole range of lecture videos and Padlet discussions and a set of seminars. This gives you a very clear sense of all of the content we built, a lot of this having to do with how do we show our accreditors what we're doing, and we were going through a triple accreditation cycle at the time we launched a lot of this, so we were a little deeper into it, but lots of work that went into building it. But we'll just pick up two last themes. One, lots of ongoing challenges. So we've felt really good about how we've piloted this, brought it to large numbers of students. They're feeling good about it. We're going all the way from our freshmen, our first year bachelor students, to our MBA students, EMBA students. We have numbers of companies through our executive education programs that are using it. So relatively broad deployment at this point. We have sets of challenges. We're going to have to keep this content constantly refreshed, fast-moving fields. We recognize that's a part of relevance, but it certainly breaks some of our structures. We have to come up with new structures to deal with that. We've had to think about how we integrate this with other courses as well. A bit of a challenge in the kinds of curricula that we teach to. And so we're spending a lot more time saying, how do we help other faculty come on board? We've gotten lots of requests from our faculty and our staff saying, we'd like to be able to take these courses. We'd like to understand what's going on. We want to have professional development for the future. So we've been able to go down those paths as well. Probably the final theme to mention in terms of challenges is, it was a bit of a cottage industry to put together all of the measurement, to stitch together all of the measurement we did, using some of the Canvas tools, using Google Analytics, using feedback fruits. And we're looking for ways to make that more seamless, to work at industrial scale, if you will, is one of our next themes. So we'd certainly love to explore with any folks who are interested, ways of deploying these in other environments. If you're interested, we're an educational institution. We certainly want to help these kinds of ideas spread. We'd love to experiment with other tools and technologies that can help create better experiences. If you have ideas, we'd love to take those on. And certainly, it's that last part around the data mining and the data analytics where we're still relatively small, and I suspect there are others who've had to do this at industrial scale where I'd love to learn.
Hi. So you mentioned that you used like a decoy technique to encourage reading where students don't really read. Could you go into a bit more detail? What was the decoy? How did it work?
Sorry, I'm having a bit of a hard time hearing it.
You mentioned you used like a decoy method to encourage students to read more than they might want to. Could you go into a bit more detail? What was the decoy and how did it work?
Sure. The question was about the decoy method. How do you use some of these nudges? So look, we had many of our faculty break up the reading into core, required, recommended. We also did that from the perspective of an overlay of different kinds of multimedia, whether it was text, cases, videos. And then for each module, and each of these courses had a very clear structure of 7 modules telling a real story. We varied across that matrix of core, required, recommended, and the different media types. We varied which of the particular ones got pushed forward for them. Be happy to show some of it to you. Still work in progress. It's it's hard to get students to consume as much of the content as our faculty would like. So we're still playing with it a fair bit, but that was the approach.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So I wonder, the whole Nano teaching is about giving you a little bit every day. So how do you do that? I didn't catch how do you use like functionality out of the box in Canvas, or do you use email, or how do you present this little extra every day?
How do we present the extra?
The content, yeah, because being Nano teaching, that would be a little every day. I believe you even had like a chart for Monday, Tuesday, and so on and so forth. So,
yeah,
great
question. So our theme, Canvas was our primary repository, primary engine of engagement, using announcements and the like in Canvas is where we were. There's a difference in my mind between micro-learning and nano-learning, right? Or nano-courses of the kind we did. Micro-learning being you get pushed something every day has become the traditional theme around micro. We focused on being intense. So we said a 2-week format where there are deliverables coming up very quickly, and there is content within Canvas that pops up for you, and announcements or emails within Canvas that drive you towards it, is what we were doing. We did ask the question of should we have a micro-learning platform, something like a Grovo or what have you, and we decided for the amount of content we had, that was not the right thing. But certainly, again, that's another nudge we could think of where could we find more ways of engaging on a daily basis without the email channel? Because that's a channel that, at least for our students, is overused and gets ignored as a result. So we stayed within Canvas for the most part.